Hello everyone, my name is Mahdi Manesh.
I'm Jörg Rheinboldt.
And today we are talking about human connections in deep tech and focus on the power of networks of AI startups. So my name is Mahdi Manesh. I'm heading the software engineering and deep tech teams at Porsche Digital. Porsche Digital is a 100% subsidiary of Porsche, and we are developing different kinds of products and services.
I'm Jörg Rheinboldt. I'm one of the managing directors of APX. We are a joint venture of Porsche, the car manufacturer, and Axel Springer, the media company. And we invest in very early stage startups. We've invested in more than 100. And if you are an early stage startup or very early stage startup and are looking for an investor, let's talk.
So we try to structure the presentation into 3 different parts actually. So we will talk about the people in deep tech, we will talk about products, and obviously also a bit about processes and how we believe success can look like. So if you look at the deep tech community, basically it has its own culture, and we are sure that it's a bit different than others in tech. So yeah, what do we mean by different? So first of all, I think the depth of topics that you're discussing is usually a bit on the very deep end, and this also means that people that you talk to, they're really passionate about what they're doing. They're really enthusiastic about their topics, and actually there's a really broad range of people talking about, let's say, AI, machine learning, or other related themes. And you can actually talk to people from academia, but you also have corporates that really want to get these topics on board.
And from our experience, it's sometimes quite a challenge when startups and corporates try to work together, because corporates usually are not that used to being extremely open about all the very interesting topics. And especially in the machine learning AI community, openness is one, I think, of the key drivers of innovation. And when your home is not so used to being open, that can be quite a challenge for everyone.
Yeah, so what we observe is actually that in an ideal world you have a decentralized team. I think in current times this is becoming really natural, but you also want to have co-creation, and in this sense you really also need to discuss what you want up front, so you don't get any, let's say, misunderstandings, for example, regarding IP that's created on the one side, and maybe the other party also wants to have rights on it. Yeah, looking at the product hypothesis that we're trying to discuss here, we believe that in software design it's actually a lot about discussing trade-offs, which means that you should also have the right people on board to discuss these things. And what do we mean by this? So quite some points here, but let's try to go over them, and let's try not to become too technical. But I think if you pick AI as one of the examples in deep tech, it really becomes quite obvious really soon that everyone still understands something different. Some people like to have analytics, which means that they really want to have a way to understand big data sets, but then make a manual decision and maybe have some spreadsheets and data sheets and dashboards.
Yeah, and also we always discuss the technological depth of what people actually want to do, if they want to really develop core technologies, or if they are more on the let's apply these core technologies other people have developed to problems we are facing or we want to solve.
Yeah, I really believe this is a key part in the discussion, because people may get really frustrated. And I think both sides are really interesting. They're really great challenges to tackle in analytics and applied machine learning, but also on the forefront of really working on new algorithms. So I think looking at AI more specifically, I think in the future it will be really important to look at securing your data, to make sure that you have a decentralized way to develop algorithms. So I think it will not be possible to have all the, let's say, smartness in one system, but you will be able to learn in a decentralized way, and you also need to be doing that across regions, companies, organizations, and also across geographic regions. And yeah, maybe picking one last point, which is I think also an opportunity for new startups, is to really look at data as a product. So of course everyone or the big corporates especially, they have their data sets, but it's also critical to understand how to use it internally but also externally. And if you look at the old days when you had procedural programming languages, one of the bigger steps towards object orientation was actually to incorporate data and the logic together. And today, if you want to have it on another abstraction level, I would really say that you need to have your models, your code, the data, as well as the infrastructure that you need to run maybe your models, your training and inference, to have it together. And then you can really have a modular building block towards creating your, let's say, really complex products.
Yeah, and also figuring out where the data comes from and where it is, which is sometimes a challenge for older organizations, because they might have a lot of data lying around everywhere.
Yep.
And like making sense of this and combining it can be a first step, and must at a lot of times be the first step to actually make use of it.
And I think today, if you have a good solution in that regard, companies will actually really welcome this and will want your support. Maybe as a last point, we already discussed the people aspects in the beginning, and if you look up Conway's law, you will get this observation that the communication paths between people actually influence your software structure. And I think this is really important to look at. I also find it quite interesting because you have really this intermingling of your software and maybe even your AI models structure and your team structure. So there's many other things to look at when you build your product. Yeah, and I think we now discussed the people aspects, we discussed product design concerns, and maybe let's talk a bit about process. Even though it may sound boring at sometimes, I think it's really important.
It's actually one of the keys of being successful, I think.
Yeah. So one aspect of processes could be actually technology transfer. So I know this is sounds a bit like an academic discussion, but most often in deep tech you have something that's not so mature, let's say, yet, or you have tried it out in a lab and it seems to work, or you have high hopes that it could be applied in a corporate or in some other environment. And now the question is, how do you get your idea and maybe your first proof of concept into an environment where it can actually scale? And I think this is really interesting, but also really challenging, because you have all these different parties involved, and you need, all of a sudden, as a founder, you need more skills than just, let's say, the technology.
The tech skills, yeah. You need to be able to manage people and their expectations. And then coming to the next point, dealing with uncertainty. I think this looking at uncertainty is, for, I think, a founder, this is a normal thing, but for more established companies, they love certainty and they love models built on the past. And another really important topic in context with this is understanding of reality. Uncertainty means you don't actually know what is going to be in like a few days, weeks, months, and you have to be okay with that. This sounds a little bit like yeah, of course, but it's especially in the context with other organizations, it's very important to have a clear understanding of what you don't know, what you want to find out when, and then also agreeing on how will you be able to interpret the reality that you will create, because there's also room for interpretation.
Yeah, I think if you just come from the tech aspect, you may have this really huge vision, and it's really attracting probably also lots of other skilled people. But on the other hand, you need to make this reality check, and you need to make sure that you're not following something that is more wishful thinking than something that you can really achieve. And so going along this path, I think, is the exciting thing to do. And I mean, yeah, Jörg mentioned it, in the past you really had your processes that would all contribute towards making something really stable. And especially in production domains, this is a natural choice. But in software, and especially in the whole data science area, you really need this more academic trial and error approach.
Yeah, and then turning the dream into reality is also like referring to what we just said, that you need to agree on how you want to interpret the reality that you are seeing, because you need these constant feedback loops of when you try something, you create a reality. That reality usually is not the intended reality, and then you need the feedback loop to what do I need to change or at which strategic level.
Yeah, and I think being able to make this change is really critical. So
Yeah, and
you
doing
have
this
to
fast, I think, is also.
yeah, and forgetting your
Yeah.
old ideas and really being able to do that, and also helping your team, if there is already a team, to make the transition. Yeah, so how does it look like, Jörg?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to start, to actually agree on what does success actually look like. And this sounds like a no-brainer, but rarely people are able to explain to each other, also across functions, across organizations, what does success look like, and then agree on how do we get there, how do we try this. And I think the things we talked about in the last minutes, they are some tools of how you can agree on what success looks like, and have like a dynamic approach to it, and then also all the formats and ways in place how to work on it.
Yeah, I think this is really critical. I mean, in the end, you need to get everyone aligned on that, because everyone obviously has also his so-called secondary goals, which is totally fine. But in the end, you need to get everyone aligned towards that vision that you may have as a company, as an organization. But then you also need to put it into your daily decisions. So this very well may also influence the way that you approach model building or data handling, etc. Because if you have a long-term vision where you really know where you're heading, you may choose totally different tools than if you want to trial and error kind of your way through. And so I would say this is the first thing that anyone should do. We try to put some of the points again in some sort of a summary here to make sure what does it mean to become excellent in operations. And Jörg, what do you tell your
think
startups?
that on each of these steps you need to figure out how you want to do this and what this actually is. Like, you have to have a clear dream, vision, and big goals that you then I think you need values and a purpose in any organization. You need to know why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? Then you need to break this down into like manageable and reachable goals. Then you need a strategy. Which steps do I want to take to get to my goals, to reach my goals? Then you need to execute. And then you need some kind of controlling where you look at what did we actually create and how much is it similar to our goals that we set. And usually the reality you create is not exactly what you had in mind. And then you need to have feedback loops and loops that allow you to adapt either your dreams, which is very, very rare. Most of the times you need to adapt your strategy and then execute and see what you actually do. And this needs to be done over and over again. And the timing and frequency that you have to do this, I think, determines the speed of your company.
I think one more point that's I think an observation is that most deep tech startups also come from this kind of academic execution, and then you try to pull this up and to find your vision, your purpose, or to put it into a long-term strategy. And at some point, what also happened in the past is that you may have a startup that has this great technology, and all of a sudden the founders notice, okay, you could actually use it for, I don't know, surveillance or any other kind of application that they didn't think about before, and all of a sudden they are maybe in a moral dilemma that they have to solve. So it's definitely not an easy way to do, but if you have your fixed, let's say, direction where you want to go, and when you're willing to question your steps, then you're on the right way.
Yeah, and this also can be like super operational, where you just have to have the time in your calendars to do exactly this, to meet. Or like Mahdi and me, where we have time in our calendars where we talk to each other, usually while walking in a forest.
Yep.
And then there's this, and there's one more thing we should consider, moment that usually is super helpful because it comes from both of us. Yeah, I think we touched on reality already, and this is something from like an investor's point of view. Reality and perception of reality is super subjective. So make sure you talk enough about how do we see the reality that we see and what does it mean? Because reality, especially these days, can be a little bit liquid. And I think it's important to agree on within the team how you look at reality and how you want to understand it, and how together you want to understand it, and how you want to live with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you pick AI as one of the examples, I think there was a big hype already 50 years ago, and they achieved obviously quite some steps. Now we are again in some sort of a hype, and I know some old colleagues and friends of mine that are running around conferences with this T-shirt. The next AI winter will be coming. So I think it's really tempting as an engineer to believe that you can solve any problem, and I think we can actually come close to that. But still, you need to make sure if you have the budget, if you are on time, if you have the right people, or if your idea is actually, if it's doable in your conditions. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and reality distortion, I think, is also something we talk about a lot, because really good founders and teams, they can imagine very vividly what the future will look like once they have reached all the things they want to do, or once they have built it. And I think it's important to, on the one hand, be able to imagine this future and be in it, but also at times come back to our reality of the people who are not living in the future where your product or where your idea is already omnipresent. And also like understand, okay, what are the steps that we need to take in order to get there?
Yeah, so as a startup team, what do you need, what do you want? I think we touched on that. It's really important when you're growing your team that you agree on these answers that you will give for yourself. And I think one good way to do it is to actually tell the story to as many people as you know. And first of all, they will question you. If they're good friends, they will definitely do that. And on the other hand, you also have told it to everyone. And so you have a certain, let's say, drive and pressure to also try to achieve your goals.
Yeah, and if you can make those people as diverse as you can from different backgrounds, the feedback you will get might be full of very, very useful shortcuts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this sums up most of the points that we made in this talk. So first of all, you need to be able to manage your stakeholders' expectations.
And your own.
And your own, quite hardly so. And basically try to understand each other on the process, which is I think one of the hardest parts, where also founding teams may have their clashes in the beginning. If you have two different founders with, let's say, the same engineering skills and they don't agree on a process, on a solution, this can already be hard enough. But if you have a diverse team, on the one hand, it's very good because you get all these perspectives in. But on the other hand, it will initially slow you down, I think, in the first discussions. And then you need someone who will support you to still come to a clear conclusion in all of your discussions.
Yeah, and then one point that sounds so stupid, but it's so important. It's this: talk to each other, which is super easy, but make sure you really understand what you're actually saying. And that is the hard part, especially when you're talking across organizations, across disciplines, across different functions. Very often people think they talk to each other, but they actually don't really understand what they are talking about. And this, I think, needs also, like you said, it needs time and effort of everyone to really understand what the others are saying. And then I think it's also important to actually check the results and realities you create and develop like a joint understanding how you want to assess them and how they should feedback into what you actually want to do and how you want to reach it.
Yeah, and feedback really means that you draw your consequences. So if you know something but don't act, this also doesn't make sense. But it actually happens, especially if you're, again, from the perspective of an engineer, if you like to work on the solution, but you know you should be also looking at budget and marketing, you may just notice but not act accordingly. So make sure that you kind of self-discipline on the way and that you learn different skills even if you come from engineering.
Yeah, and the better idea sometimes might be the better idea, but it might hurt to accept that it's going to change something that was very dear to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. All right, yeah, I think this concludes our talk. So we touched upon different aspects and we tried to structure it around people, product, and process. And I hope you took away some points from our discussion.
And thank you very much for listeing. Have a great conference.